Willow Winters had turned down more powerful men than she could count, but none of them had ever come back for a second attempt at asking her out. She stood behind the glossy counter of her family's luxury hotel in downtown Boston, reviewing the guest manifest for the upcoming week. The Winters Grand had been in her family for 3 generations, and though her father officially owned it, Willow ran the daily operations with precision that would make any business school professor proud. At 26, she had transformed the boutique hotel from a struggling establishment into one of the most sought-after accommodations in the city. The revolving doors swept open, and a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit walked through. Willow barely glanced up from her tablet until her assistant manager, Joyce, practically materialized at her elbow. "That's Harrison Grayson," Joyce whispered urgently. "The Harrison Grayson. His manufacturing company just landed the biggest defense contract in Massachusetts history." Willow looked up properly this time. Harrison Grayson was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers rather than in boardrooms. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was worth. His eyes, a striking shade of gray-blue, swept the lobby before landing directly on her. He walked straight to her counter, bypassing Joyce entirely. "I need your best suite for 3 months," he said without preamble. His voice was deep, carrying the slight roughness of someone who spent their days issuing orders and closing deals. "We have the presidential suite available," Willow replied smoothly, pulling up the booking system. "It's $4,500 per night. Done." He pulled out a black credit card. "I'm relocating my operations headquarters here temporarily while our new facility is being built." Willow processed his information with professional efficiency, very aware that his gaze never left her face. She had dealt with wealthy men before. They usually fell into 2 categories: those who thought their money entitled them to special treatment, and those who actually deserved their success. She was still determining which category Harrison Grayson occupied. "You'll be in suite 1201, she said, handing him the key card. "Our concierge can help with anything you need." "What time do you finish work?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "Excuse me, your shift, when does it end?" His expression was serious, almost intense. "I'd like to take you to dinner." Willow had perfected her polite rejection over years of working in hospitality. "That's very kind, Mr. Grayson, but I don't date guests. Company policy." "Is it really company policy, or is that just what you tell men you're not interested in?" His directness was surprising. Most men would have retreated at the first no. "Both," she said firmly. Something flickered in his eyes, not anger or wounded pride, but something else. Determination, maybe. "Fair enough, but I'll be here for 3 months, plenty of time for you to change your mind." "I won't," Willow said. He smiled, a slow curve of his mouth that transformed his entire face from intimidating to devastating. "We'll see." Over the next 2 weeks, Harrison Grayson proved to be unlike any guest the Winters Grand had ever hosted. He was polite to the staff, tipped generously, and never made unreasonable demands. He also asked Willow out every single day. "Dinner tonight?" He would ask each morning as he passed through the lobby. "No, thank you," she would respond. "Coffee then, just 20 minutes." "I'm working." "You have to eat lunch." "Not with you." The exchanges became part of her daily routine. Her staff started anticipating them with barely concealed amusement. Even her father, Daniel Winters, who stopped by the hotel most afternoons, noticed. "That Grayson fellow seems quite taken with you," he observed one Thursday as they reviewed quarterly reports in her office. "He's persistent," Willow admitted. "He's also transforming the manufacturing sector in New England," her father said thoughtfully. "I looked into his company. Started from nothing 12 years ago, built it into a $2 billion empire. He employs over 3,000 people and just donated $5 million to the Children's Hospital." "Are you suggesting I should date him because he's rich and charitable?" "I'm suggesting you should consider that a man who builds something from nothing and gives back to his community might be worth getting to know." Her father closed his laptop. "You've been alone since Marcus, sweetheart. That was 4 years ago." Willow's jaw tightened. Marcus had been her college boyfriend, the man she thought she would marry until she discovered he had been cheating throughout their entire relationship. The betrayal had left scars deeper than she liked to admit. "I'm not alone. I have my work, I have this hotel, I have family." "That's not the same as having someone to build a life with." Her father's expression softened. "I'm not pushing. I just don't want you to close yourself off to possibilities because of one bad experience." That evening, Willow stayed late to handle a problem with the kitchen supplier. By the time she locked her office, the lobby was quiet, most guests already in their rooms or out enjoying Boston's nightlife. She was surprised to find Harrison sitting in one of the leather armchairs near the fireplace, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as her heels clicked across the marble floor. "Don't you have a massive company to run?" she asked, stopping near his chair. "I do. I ran it quite effectively from about 6 this morning until 20 minutes ago." He stood, slipping his tablet into a leather messenger bag. "Now I'm waiting for you. I already said no to dinner." "You did, but I noticed you're just leaving now, which means you probably haven't eaten, and there's an excellent ramen place 3 blocks from here that stays open until midnight." He held up his hands. "Not a date. Just 2 people who happen to be hungry eating food in proximity to each other." Willow should have said no. Every instinct told her to maintain her boundaries, to keep this professional. But she was hungry and exhausted, and something about his patient persistence had worn down her defenses just enough. "1 meal," she said, "and you stop asking me out every day." "I'll stop asking for a week," he countered. "That's not what I said, but it's what I'm offering." His smile was back, warm and slightly playful. "Take it or leave it." Against her better judgment, Willow found herself walking beside Harrison through the cool October night. The ramen shop was exactly where he said it would be, a tiny place with only 8 tables and steam fogging the windows. The elderly Japanese woman behind the counter greeted Harrison by name. "You're a regular here?" Willow asked as they slid into a booth. "I like good food and I like supporting small businesses." He ordered in Japanese, then glanced at her. "Spicy or mild?" "Spicy," she said automatically. They fell into conversation more easily than Willow expected. Harrison asked about the hotel, genuinely interested in the challenges of running a family business in a competitive market. He listened when she talked about the renovations she wanted to implement and the delicate balance between modernizing and maintaining the hotel's historic character. "Why manufacturing?" she asked eventually. "It's not exactly the sexy startup world." "Because manufacturing built this country, and we shipped most of it overseas for cheaper labor," Harrison said, his expression growing serious. "I wanted to prove you could make quality products domestically, pay people fair wages, and still run a profitable company. It took years of operating on razor-thin margins, but we did it. Your father must be proud." Something shuddered in his expression. "My father died when I was 16, car accident. My mother raised me and my 2 sisters on a secretary's salary. She worked herself to exhaustion to keep us fed and housed." Willow felt something shift in her chest. "That must have been hard." "It taught me what matters. Money isn't about luxury, it's about security. It's about never having to choose between electricity and groceries. It's about making sure the people who depend on you are taken care of." He met her eyes. "That's why I built the company, and that's why I'm careful about who I let into my life." The statement hung between them, weighted with meaning. "Then why pursue someone who keeps rejecting you?" Willow asked quietly. "Because I know the difference between someone who's not interested and someone who's scared." His voice was gentle. "And because the moment I saw you, something just clicked. I don't expect you to feel the same way, not yet. But I'm not the kind of man who walks away from something important just because it's difficult." They stayed at the ramen shop for 2 hours, talking until the owner started cleaning around them. Harrison walked her back to the hotel, and when they reached the entrance, he didn't try to kiss her or even hold her hand. "Thank you for taking a chance on dinner," he said simply. Willow watched him disappear into the elevator, her mind spinning. She had built such careful walls around herself, convinced that staying safe meant staying alone. But Harrison Grayson was dismantling those walls one persistent conversation at a time. True to his word, he didn't ask her out for an entire week. But that didn't mean he wasn't present. He struck up conversations when he passed through the lobby, remembered details she mentioned in passing, and somehow always appeared when she looked like she needed help with something heavy or complicated. On the 8th day, he caught her during her lunch break. Dinner. He asked with that devastating smile. Willow looked at him for a long moment, this man who had somehow become part of her daily routine, who made her laugh and challenged her assumptions, and looked at her like she was the most interesting person in any room. "Yes," she said. His smile widened into something brilliant. "Really? Yes, but somewhere nicer than a ramen shop. I know just the place." Harrison took her to a small Italian restaurant in the North End, the kind of place with white tablecloths and candles and a wine list that required serious consideration. They talked about everything: her dreams for the hotel's future, his concerns about expanding his business too quickly, her complicated relationship with her younger brother, his close bond with his sisters. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Harrison asked over dessert. "Running the Winters Grand completely, probably opening a second location." Willow paused. "Maybe not quite so alone." "And what changed?" His voice was careful. "You seemed pretty committed to solitude when we met." "Someone showed me that persistence isn't the same thing as pressure," she said. "That showing up every day and being genuinely interested is different from demanding attention. You respected my no, but you didn't let it be the end of the conversation." "Because I knew," Harrison said simply. "From that first moment at the desk, I knew you were going to be important to me. Call it instinct or insanity, but I couldn't just walk away." They started dating properly after that, though they kept it quiet at first. Willow didn't want the hotel staff gossiping, and Harrison was private by nature. He would finish his work by 7 most evenings, and they would have dinner, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes in his suite where they ordered room service and talked until midnight. Willow learned that Harrison was funny in a dry, unexpected way. That he was competitive about board games but gracious in defeat. That he called his mother every Sunday without fail and could quote entire scenes from old action movies. He was generous and thoughtful, remembering when she mentioned she liked a particular kind of flower and ensuring a fresh bouquet appeared in her office weekly. But he was also intense and demanding, both of himself and others. He worked constantly, taking calls at all hours, reviewing contracts over breakfast, making decisions that affected thousands of lives with calm authority. Willow sometimes wondered if there was room in his carefully ordered life for the kind of relationship she was starting to want. The question became urgent 2 months into their relationship when Harrison's assistant called to cancel their dinner plans for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. "Emergency at the plant," the assistant explained apologetically. "Mr. Grayson asked me to tell you he's sorry and he'll make it up to you." Willow set down her phone and stared at the reservation confirmation on her computer screen. She had booked them a private dinner at the restaurant where they had their first real date, planning to tell Harrison that she was falling in love with him. Instead, she was alone in her office, wondering if she was fooling herself again. She went home to her apartment, changed into comfortable clothes, and tried not to feel sorry for herself. She was being ridiculous. Harrison had a massive company to run. Of course emergencies would come up. She couldn't expect him to drop everything just because they had dinner plans. The knock on her door came at 9:30. Harrison stood in the hallway, his suit jacket missing, his tie loosened, his expression exhausted but determined. "You're not at the hotel," he said. "You're not at the plant," she countered. "Can I come in?" Willow stepped aside. Harrison walked into her apartment, taking in the space with visible interest. It was her sanctuary, decorated in soft blues and grays, with photographs of her family and places she had traveled covering one entire wall. "I'm sorry about dinner," he said, turning to face her. "There was a problem with one of our suppliers, and if I didn't handle it personally, we were going to miss a delivery deadline that would have cost us a major contract. I understand. Your work is important. So are you." He closed the distance between them, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I'm still figuring out how to balance everything. I spent 12 years building my company, and it's been my entire life for so long that sometimes I forget there are other things that matter just as much. But you matter, Willow. You matter so much that I left my operations manager handling a crisis so I could come here and tell you that in person." Willow felt her throat tighten. "I was going to tell you something tonight, at dinner. Tell me now." "I'm in love with you," she said simply. "I tried not to be because it seemed too fast and too intense, and I swore after Marcus that I wouldn't let anyone have the power to hurt me again. But you're not Marcus. You're nothing like him. You're kind and driven, and you actually see me, not just the hotel manager or Daniel Winters' daughter, but me, and I'm in love with you." Harrison's expression transformed into something that made her heart stutter. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I fell in love with you the day you turned me down at the hotel desk," he said. "I looked at you standing there, so confident and self-assured, and I thought, this is the woman I've been waiting for. Every single person told me I was crazy for pursuing someone who clearly wasn't interested, but I knew. I knew if I could just get you to give me a chance, you would see what I already knew, that we fit." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Willow melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble away. They spent that night talking on her couch, wrapped around each other, making plans and promises. Harrison admitted that he wanted to propose but knew it was too soon. Willow confessed that she had been imagining a future with him almost from their first dinner. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Willow woke up to find Harrison making coffee in her kitchen, still wearing his dress shirt and pants from the night before, something settled deep in her chest. This was real. This was lasting. Harrison's 3-month stay at the Winters Grand ended, but he didn't move far. He bought a penthouse 10 minutes from the hotel and asked Willow to help him furnish it. They spent weekends shopping for furniture and arguing playfully about color schemes and whether his massive television was really necessary. "It's a home theater system," Harrison insisted as they stood in the living room of his new place, surveying the enormous screen. "It's a sign of masculine insecurity," Willow teased. He caught her around the waist, pulling her back against his chest. "I'm very secure in my masculinity. The television stays." She laughed and turned in his arms. "Fine, but I'm picking the couch. Deal." They fell into a rhythm over the following months. Harrison still worked intensely, but he carved out time for them with deliberate intention. They had standing dinner dates 3 nights a week, and he never scheduled meetings on Sunday. Willow met his mother and sisters, and they welcomed her with open arms that made her eyes sting with gratitude. Harrison charmed her father over golf and won over her skeptical younger brother by genuinely listening to his ideas for hotel renovations. "When are you going to marry her?" Willow's brother Thomas asked Harrison one evening when they thought she was out of earshot. "When I'm sure she'll say yes," Harrison replied. Willow pressed her hand to her mouth, her heart racing. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but now she was rooted to the spot. "She'll say yes," Thomas said with certainty. "She's been happier this past year than I've ever seen her. You're good for her." "She's good for me too," Harrison said quietly. "She keeps me grounded, reminds me that there's more to life than the next deal or the next milestone. I was so focused on building something successful that I forgot to build a life. She gave me that." Willow walked into the room before she could start crying in the hallway. Both men looked up, and Harrison's expression softened immediately. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough," she said. Thomas excused himself with a knowing grin. Harrison crossed to Willow, pulling her close. "I have something planned," he murmured against her hair. Don't let my conversation with your brother spoil the surprise. What surprise? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise. The surprise came 2 weeks later. Harrison took her to Cape Cod for the weekend, renting a house right on the beach. It was November, too cold for swimming, but perfect for long walks along the shore wrapped in thick sweaters. On Saturday evening, he led her down to the beach as the sun began to set, the sky painting itself in oranges and purples and deep blues. The wind whipped Willow's hair around her face, and she laughed, trying to tame it as Harrison pulled her close. "I want to tell you something," he said, his voice carrying over the sound of the waves. "Before I met you, I thought I had everything figured out. I knew what success looked like. I had goals and timelines and 5-year plans. And then you rejected me in that hotel lobby, and suddenly none of it mattered as much as figuring out how to make you smile." Willow's breath caught as Harrison dropped to one knee, the sand shifting beneath him. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning ring that caught the fading light. "You taught me that persistence isn't about wearing someone down. It's about showing up every day and proving that you mean what you say. So I'm showing up now, Willow Winters, and I'm asking you to let me keep showing up for the rest of our lives. Marry me, build something extraordinary with me. Let me love you forever." Tears streamed down Willow's face as she nodded, words temporarily beyond her. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, absolutely yes." Harrison slid the ring onto her finger and stood, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her. She wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing and crying simultaneously, overwhelmed by the sheer rightness of this moment. They married 6 months later in the ballroom of the Winters Grand, surrounded by family and friends. Willow wore her grandmother's lace veil and carried white roses. Harrison looked devastating in his tuxedo, and when he saw her walking down the aisle on her father's arm, his composure cracked just enough for her to see tears in his eyes. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when she reached him. "You're not so bad yourself," she whispered back. They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks eating incredible food, exploring ancient cities, and planning their future. Harrison wanted children, at least 2 or 3. Willow wanted to expand the hotel business, maybe start a consulting company helping other family-run establishments modernize. They wanted a house with a big yard, maybe a dog or 2, definitely a home theater system that Willow would pretend to complain about. "I'm going to love you forever," Harrison said one night as they sat on their hotel balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast. "I'm going to wake up every single day and choose you, just like I chose to keep pursuing you even when you kept saying no." "I'm glad you did," Willow said, leaning into his side. "I'm glad you saw through my defenses and recognized that I wasn't rejecting you, I was protecting myself." "You don't need to protect yourself anymore," Harrison said softly. "I've got you." And he did. They returned to Boston and bought a house in Brookline. A beautiful old Victorian that needed work, but had good bones and a yard big enough for the future children Harrison insisted they would have. Willow threw herself into renovations while also working with her father to open a second Winters location in Cambridge. Harrison's company continued to grow, and he was featured in business magazines as one of the country's most successful young CEOs. But the accolades and success mattered less than the life they built together. They hosted Sunday dinners for their combined families, with Harrison's mother teaching Willow old family recipes while her father and Harrison debated politics in the living room. They adopted a golden retriever they named Bailey, who immediately claimed Harrison as his favorite person despite Willow's protests. They traveled when they could, took long walks through their neighborhood, and fell asleep most nights tangled together in the bed they had carefully selected together. 2 years after their wedding, Willow discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison on a Sunday morning, handing him a small wrapped box across their breakfast table. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes and a note that read, "Coming soon." Harrison stared at the shoes for a long moment, then looked up at her with an expression of such pure joy that Willow felt her own eyes fill with tears. "Really?" he asked, his voice rough. "Really," she confirmed. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and into his arms, holding her like she was made of something precious and fragile. "We're having a baby," he said wonderingly. "We're going to be parents. Are you ready for that?" Willow asked, suddenly nervous. "I've been ready since the day I met you," Harrison said firmly. "Since the day you turned me down and I decided I was going to spend the rest of my life proving I was worth a yes." Their daughter, Hope Elizabeth Grayson, was born on a bright April morning. She had Harrison's gray-blue eyes and Willow's stubborn chin, and both her parents fell completely in love the moment they held her. Harrison took 2 months off work, the first real vacation he had taken in 15 years, and spent it learning to change diapers, walking circles around their house at 3 in the morning with a crying baby, and marveling at every tiny thing their daughter did. "She sneezed," he announced one afternoon with the same tone he might use to reveal a major business breakthrough. "Babies do that," Willow said, laughing from her position on the couch. "But did you see how small her nose is? How does a sneeze even fit?" Willow loved watching Harrison as a father. He approached parenthood with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else, reading books about child development, child-proofing their house within an inch of its life, and making sure Willow had everything she needed. He was patient and gentle with Hope, singing her off-key lullabies and having long, serious conversations with her about life, even though she couldn't understand a word. When Hope was 6 months old, Willow returned to work part-time, and Harrison adjusted his schedule to be home more. They hired a nanny, but both made it clear that family came first. Harrison missed meetings for pediatrician appointments and left the office early for family dinners. The company didn't collapse. In fact, it thrived, perhaps because Harrison's employees saw him modeling a healthy work-life balance and felt empowered to do the same. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Harrison arranged for his mother to watch Hope so he could take Willow back to Cape Cod, to the same beach where he had proposed. They walked along the shore as the sun set, just like they had that November evening 3.5 years earlier. "Do you remember when you told me you didn't date guests?" Harrison asked, his hand warm around hers. "I remember you ignoring that policy with impressive determination," Willow replied. "Best decision I ever made." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "I want to thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on the persistent CEO who wouldn't leave you alone, for building this incredible life with me, for giving me hope and a family and a reason to leave the office before midnight." "You gave me all of that too," Willow said softly. "You showed me that letting someone in doesn't make you weak. That love isn't about perfect timing or playing it safe. It's about finding someone who sees you and chooses you and shows up every single day to prove it." Harrison kissed her as the waves crashed behind them, and Willow thought about how close she had come to missing all of this. If she had been just a little bit more stubborn, if Harrison had been just a little bit less persistent, they might have remained strangers. She would have stayed safe behind her walls, and he would have continued building his empire without anyone to remind him that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. But he had pursued her despite her rejection. He had kept showing up, kept proving that his interest wasn't fleeting or superficial, kept demonstrating that he saw something in her worth fighting for. And his persistence had carried them through to forever. 2 years later, their son Marcus Daniel Grayson arrived, named for the grandfathers he would never meet but whose legacies lived on in his parents' values. Hope became a devoted big sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bottle feedings. Their house filled with the beautiful chaos of family life. Toys scattered across floors, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, the constant noise of children playing and laughing and occasionally fighting. Harrison's company continued to grow, but he grew with it, learning to delegate and trust his team. He turned down opportunities that would require extended travel and passed on deals that would demand too much of his time. He had built something successful, but he had also built something more important, a life filled with love and purpose, and people who depended on him for more than just business decisions. Willow opened her consulting firm when Marcus turned 1, helping struggling hotels modernize while maintaining their unique character. She traveled occasionally for work, and Harrison stayed home with the kids, proving himself just as capable of managing bath time and bedtime stories as he was at running board meetings. On a Sunday evening 10 years after their first meeting, Willow stood in their kitchen making dinner while Harrison helped Hope with her homework at the table, and Marcus built an elaborate tower out of blocks in the corner. Music played softly from the speakers, and through the window, she could see Bailey sleeping in a patch of late afternoon sunlight. Harrison looked up from Hope's math worksheet and caught her watching them. He smiled, that same devastating smile that had first broken through her defenses a decade earlier, and mouthed, "I love you," across the kitchen. Willow smiled back, her heart full to bursting. She had tried so hard to protect herself, to stay safe behind walls built from past hurt and fear of future pain. She had turned him down, certain that keeping her distance was the same thing as keeping herself whole. But Harrison Grayson had seen through her defenses, had recognized her fear for what it was, and had chosen to pursue her anyway. Not with pressure or demands, but with patient, persistent presence. He had shown up every single day and proved that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about choosing someone and continuing to choose them through all the messy, complicated, beautiful moments that made up a life. His persistence had started as daily questions in a hotel lobby, small conversations that slowly built into something bigger. It had continued through their courtship, their engagement, their marriage. It persisted through late-night feedings and work stress, and the inevitable challenges that came with building a life together. It showed up in the way he still brought her coffee every morning, remembered the tiny details she mentioned in passing, and looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in any room. The CEO who had pursued her despite her rejection had kept his promise. He had loved her persistently, faithfully, completely. And that persistence, which she had once mistaken for mere stubbornness, had become the foundation of a love that would last forever. Hope called out a question about fractions, and Marcus's block tower crashed to the floor with a dramatic clatter that made Bailey bark. Harrison caught Willow's eye again and grinned, and she laughed, returning to her dinner preparations. This was forever. This noise and chaos and love, this man who still made her heart race, these children who had transformed them both into softer, better versions of themselves. This life they had built together, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day, Harrison had been right all along. His persistence would persist into forever, and Willow had never been so grateful to be wrong.